Welcome to Lady Audaci-TEA. I'm Alex.
And I'm Meredith. And before we get started, we have our next Patreon Apple subscription episode for August, and it is Miss Wallace Simpson, if you're nasty. And the conversation, listen, we are reading books for this. I bought an out-of-print diary on Lord Beaverbrook, and I got in touch with some of the authors of biographies written about Wallace. And let's just say there is someone that does not mince words with how she feels about someone else's portrayal. I said, oh boy, she did not save this for the burn book. It's going to be so amazing. Link in the show notes if you want to join our Patreon. Also, shout out to our Lady Whistledown tier, $25 tier,
Hey.
HRH Duchess Normal. Oh my God. I hope she doesn't hear this. I'm
She's
sorry.
just like
she's
everyone
normal.
else.
You know what? She's not normal. She's sensational. She's HRH Duchess Nora Barbie. So thank you, Nora,
Duchess.
for being a subscriber. And also, we need to thank our Patreon and Apple subscription people because, Alex, can you let the people know our news?
So we have hired an editing company to help us out with our podcast. We are so excited. And literally the reason we are able to do this is because of our paid subscribers on Patreon. Like, thank you guys so much. We are so excited. I mean, we're like literally investing in all aspects into this podcast because we love it so much. And we love talking to you guys. It's been so fun. Thank you.
Y'all, we are so professional. We are so professional. We both have our button downs on today. We are like,
okay,
we're the working women, okay? Stumbled out of bed and I tumbled in the kitchen. Little Dolly. It feels very cool to say, oh, we're going to send it to our editors. But honestly, thank you guys. Yes. Thank you. Apple, Patreon. Thank you so much for subscribing to our content. This is honestly like where the money goes, is improving the show and giving you guys a better product. We just had a little team meeting, a quarterly meeting, I'm just going to call it, because it was just us talking on the phone. But we have some really exciting things we're planning for the next couple of months into the new year. So stay tuned for that. So before we get into our interview with Miss Christine Wells, let's catch up a little bit. First, we need to talk about Dan Wootton. I have such a hard time saying his name, and I'm getting roasted on TikTok because I turn into this Cockney thing. I'm like, Dan Wootton. Like, I'm just like swallowing vowels. I've confused myself so much. I don't know what this man's name is. We're just going to call him Dan the Dirty Man. So as of this recording, Dan is still on air for GB News, railing against the Sussex Squad because, focus on the real problem. His Daily Mail column has been paused, and he also has new legal representation. So either that fundraiser, that slush fund didn't work out, and he had to get cheaper representation. But I don't know. You go on, Alex.
GB News, too, I just saw that his ratings are tanking. They have tanked. It's going to be very interesting to see where he is just at the end of August. I mean, I think GB News is going to hold on to him and he'll hold on to them. But at some point, if the ratings are just diving and it's just, you're not helping us out, advertisers might start pulling out. It's gonna be interesting to see where this goes.
It couldn't happen to a nicer man. So we're just gonna quickly go. We're just gonna quickly go over some of the articles that have come out recently since we did our 2-part episode. Go back and listen to it. We got into all of Byline Times' investigation into Dan. So on July 28th, another part of the series comes out, and this is about the Sun and the Mail knowing the claims against Dan before Byline Times came out with their investigation, which is so hypocritical when you think about the Sun's defense of their BBC coverage of the Hugh Edwards scandal from July 13th. Here's what they said to defend their decision to do that while knowing this Dan information. They said, a desperate couple approached us with firm evidence that he was paying large sums to a young person with a spiraling drug addiction and that the star had been sent sexual pictures. But police said nothing could be done. And despite a detailed complaint to the BBC, it did nothing either. What do our critics, especially Mr. Edwards' pious media friends, think we should have done? Told the family to shove off? Turned a blind eye to what appeared to be a clear abuse of power by a household name? Huh.
There's so much to say about that one. It's just And I think it's true. It's them being
Pot
on a
meet
high
kettle.
horse. Yeah, it's just them being on a high horse, I think, is the main thing. Because my thing when it comes to the BBC story, I think there's a lot to look into that and a lot of angles to look at. But the fact of the matter is, the Sun has another story like this, and we have a lot more evidence that makes it clear he exploited and abused people, and they will not report. That's the issue with the Sun and the Daily Mail. It's like when it's your own people, it's zip. Nope. Nope, nope, nope.
And I also think to some extent, there's a certain amount of just gumption in feeling like, the byline is looking into this. You know that they have presented you with information. They have gone to the Met. And you still feel confident enough in your position to run full steam ahead with the Hugh Edwards stuff and ignore the Dan stuff.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes,
that
and
is
be
a
on a
lot
high
of
horse.
gumption.
Yeah. Don't talk to me about how you're, free media and we bring the hard hitting stories and we have to pay a price. No. Nope, 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 nope.
The Sun is famously for the people,
Famously for the people.
So if that was about, the way that the Sun and the Daily Mail knew, the next scene that Byline Times paints for us is August 1st. And this is when Alex speaks out. So that was Dan's former partner who finds that treasure trove of information in Dan's flat when he's cat sitting, which is honestly perfect. I'm like, I didn't know Dan was cat sitting, but it feels right. So what I actually find interesting is, and this might just be interesting for me, to be honest, is that apparently, like, the way that the way that Alex found stuff is he was looking for a dosing ball for the washing up powder, and he put his hand down the side of the washing machine, and there was like a bag that had one of those travel padlocks on it, but it was like scrunched in there. I thought honestly that Dan was doing like some Spy Kid stuff and had a secret compartment behind his washing machine, but it's not that at all. I thought it was like a built-in
You got a
padlock.
safe? Like,
no, he just got like a freaking bag. He got like a gym bag with a lock.
I guess when you work at the Sun and the Daily Mail, again, you're above everyone. You're untouchable. So you just
dumb criminal.
Okay.
Dumb criminal.
Dumb criminal.
So what we find out is we really get Alex's side of the story of the man who was approached by Martin Branning to make all that sexual content in order to get close to his partner, who was an employee of the Sun and got that sex tape that was filmed without consent. This is Alex's side of the story on that. But he also talks about how the Murdoch work environment was kind of perfect for someone like Dan. And what he says was, working for Murdoch, that environment, which was very ruthless, very cutthroat, very competitive for the biggest stories, changed him. It enabled the worst parts of him and amplified them. And so he really talks about how, yes, this is the kind of environment that Dan was working in, but you also have to be ripe for that kind of work and have a part of you that is so broken that you're willing to do anything for a story. And that's Dan.
Yeah. Like, he was the perfect person to hire because he already had that. And I'm glad that he talks about the environment he was in while still giving him agency.
Yes, I totally agree. And the other thing we find out surprisingly is that Dan is center left, and his parents are too. And so Alex never saw him going far right. I am not surprised that people like Dan, and even people like Piers Morgan that weren't necessarily hard conservative at the beginning, these are people that do not have a moral compass, that are willing to do anything for a story. And if the money is in hard alt-right caricatures of screaming, angry men, that's what they're going to do. They don't
go
care.
for the money. Yeah, they go for the money. And this stuff has always kind of been right there in their past. But now it's popular. So they're like, yay, I can be extreme too.
Popular. I know. It's like that is, listen, you're going to go where the money is when you have no scruples or morals. And it really does bring into question, where is the journalism here exactly? And I really think it's a referendum on the media ecosystem, particularly the Murdoch empire.
Yes.
So really quickly, August 3rd rolls around. And this section I would like to call dumb criming, where essentially because of a data breach with certain websites, all this information became public knowledge about passwords, and Byline Times and the work of security experts figure out that the same passwords for Maria Joseph and Martin Branning were also used for a sketchy sounding, now defunct DVD website. And like, statistically, they bring in a statistician, and statistically the chances of this combination is like near impossible. If you're going to do crimes, if you're going to be criming on the internet, change your passwords. Come on. Do I have to teach you everything?
Oh my gosh, this man. Like, and again, I don't like to throw around the word narcissism because it just gets thrown around too much by people. But sometimes with Dan, I truly think, because it's like dumb and also it's just like, you never thought you would be caught. And I think even if people knew about it, you would never go down for it because you have Murdoch behind you. You have News UK behind you. It's just like, I don't know. I know he's dumb, but he's also smart. So I'm like, narcissism, dude. Like, you just really thought that much of yourself.
Alex, it's to have the confidence of a mediocre white man. What a thing.
I know, right? Is it narcissism or just being a mediocre white man?
Just being a white man.
Them, okay?
All the time. So listen, that was bananas, but we still have bananas articles because, I mean, the fun never stops with the British media. Oh, yeah. Alex is doing a little dancing in the library.
About this one. You know, I low-key been talking shit about this in the voice notes. So
she's so ready to talk to somebody else about this. Alex, take it away. Take it away with your bananas article of the week.
So I got to give a teensy bit of a background here, which I will go more into, on our social medias. But this all started because on May 3rd, Susie Minkis, who is a fashion editor and OBE holder, made not so nice comments about Kate and her relationship with jewelry. So this was for a podcast. And again, this happened on May 5th May 5th when she made these comments. It wasn't though until July 26th that the Daily Mail pretty much unearthed these comments for an article. I'm guessing royals are on summer vacation. They're bored. Here we go. So they unearth these comments and people are upset. It gets kind of big in the British tabloid media. And then by July 27th, we have a rebuttal article from the Telegraph by Tamara Abraham. And it's titled, "The Real Reason the Princess of Wales Wears Cheap Jewelry." So, yeah. Within the first 2-3 paragraphs, I was like, okay, here is 2 bananas for bananas, because what are we doing? So it pretty much starts with rolling back literally a decade worth of Kate and how much Queen Elizabeth II respected Kate, which is why she got so much access to the royal vault, to say that Kate rarely got access. Abraham writes, ever since she arrived at St. James Palace in November 2010 with the late Princess Diana's engagement ring on her finger, the Princess of Wales has been afforded rare access to the historic jewelry in the royal vaults. Okay, rare. They use the word rare, you guys. I'm just pointing that out. I'm highlighting this. And then they go on to list 5 pieces that she has worn. And then it goes on to say, it sounds like a lot, and the collected value of those pieces is millions of pounds. But over the course of 11 years as a working royal, it's a relatively modest selection. Okay, so yeah, if we're pretending like she only has 5 pieces that have been lent to her, that would be very modest and it would be rare. But that's just not true. There's a People article from 2022 that actually lists all of the jewelry that Kate has worn that the Queen Elizabeth II has worn. And mind you, this is only jewelry that she's gotten from the vault Queen Elizabeth II has worn. So Diana's pieces, the Queen's mother's pieces, all of those things are not on this list. And there's still 13 pieces of jewelry. 13 pieces of jewelry.
They can't count at the Telegraph.
Right?
They can't count over there. They also got it wrong, Archie's place in the line of succession when they did an article about his 4th birthday. Numbers are really tough over there.
Someone is challenged by numbers. And as someone who doesn't like numbers either, I get it, but fact check, boo-boo. Fact check. Okay.
Seriously.
And in 2023, she's gone at least 4 to 5 new pieces. I would say a few under King Charles. And like we said, the emerald piece that Diana made famous, the Princess of Wales, that's not any lent. Okay. She got that piece for a big moment. And that was a big moment. I remember saying King Charles may not like them and the attention they get, but he's also not dumb. And he knows Kate needs some jewels. And on top of that, not only has the quantity been pretty high, but the quality, especially when Queen Elizabeth II was alive. One of the ones actually listed in the People article is the Pearl Drop brooch. And it's what Kate wore. Yeah, that's the one that she wore for Kate and William's most recent portrait. And that was the Queen's most worn brooch. It was known that she really loved that brooch and was actually affectionately called, they say, the Duchess of Cambridge. So again, it's just not connecting. And then the second big one for me, again, I'm like, this is bananas. This is freaking banana. B-A-N-N. Okay. Anyways, the song is getting stuck in my head. They go on then to talk about how a lot of this too of why she's maybe not dipping into the royal vault is not only because new people, have control over it and they get to tell her what she gets to wear, but also because she wants to be culturally sensitive to the conversations going on around right now about how a lot of these jewels were stolen. Just straight up stolen.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Sure. And mind you, this little section is after they talk about her love for Suzanne jewelry, which is a French-owned brand by white women. And they made headlines, I think, in 2018 because they decided to exploit Indigenous people by having them model for all of their ads and their website with pieces they made inspired by this culture. They didn't pay those women. They never told them they were going to be used for ad space or that they were pretty much ripping off their jewelry to sell for double the price.
White women, am I right?
Okay, we're just being so culturally sensitive, Kate. So Abraham writes when giving examples about the times that other royals have gotten in trouble because we found out the province or the who of their jewelry. Of course, they talk about Meghan, but there can be a more sensitive issue at play. The province of jewelry can be a thorny issue for royals, as we saw when the Duchess of Sussex wore a pair of diamond earrings during the royal tour of New Zealand, Fiji, and Tonga in 2018. Palace aides initially claimed that the earrings were borrowed, but it later emerged that they were a gift from Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, who was accused of ordering the assassination of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
Khashoggi. It's okay. It's a hard one.
I said that pretty well, though. Khashoggi. Okay.
It was really good. Remember, Alex has dyslexia. She's cool. Don't be uncool about it. Okay. We're doing it live.
And then it goes on to say, ethical questions aside, gifts from other heads of state remain the property of the crown, not the recipient. So again, she's saying that Kate and her longtime assistant, stylist Natasha Archer, are likely being very careful that she doesn't wear jewelry that might raise awkward questions. And all I'm going to say there is big round of hypocrisy. Because the thing about is awkward questions were raised and conversations were rightly had about that piece of jewelry because the palace gave us that information. It was actually pointed out then by Gert Royals that it was very, very shocking to see them release that information because that information too wasn't released until I think 2020 before the Oprah interview actually. So the palace kept this information quiet like they always do until the Oprah interview happened and they just started releasing all of this stuff. So the only reason Kate has never had to have these awkward conversations and questions raised around her is because the palace has not given us information on a lot of her jewels. There's many examples of this, but one that I'm thinking of was in 2022 during the Caribbean tour. She wore those like beautiful tassel earrings that we all know Queen Elizabeth II loves. And the thing about those earrings, guys, we don't know the province. We don't know who gave them to her. We know nothing about it. So awkward conversations and questions can't be raised when we're not being given the information to ask them. And again, bananas.
It's bananas, but I have to say, I'm going to have to disagree with you on this. She didn't
okay,
take
let's
me
go. I'm rolling out my sleeves. Sleeves.
Okay. I'm taking out my hoops because I'm from Jersey. I understand that, you might think that this is a misstep, but did you know that William and Kate are giving a masterclass in image branding and it's leaving Harry and Meghan in the shade? Because that is a literal headline from the Express UK. Exclusive. Prince William and Prince Kate have been doing everything right and their image branding continues to glow as the Prince of Wales is set to make his first official visit to New York City to repair the earth.
My mouth dropped, guys. Why do we always have to be so dramatic about William and what he's actually doing?
I literally was like, shut the fuck up.
Repair the earth.
If a royal takes a misstep in the woods and no journalist reports on it, did the misstep even happen? The way this article relies on you not remembering the way the media plays a role in branding and that the status of William and Kate as future king and queen also plays a role in how they are covered is, I mean, oh my God, the lack of self-reflection is so real. My other thing is to your point, how is William going to have time to repair the earth when he's also trying to end homelessness in 5 years in the UK and has he finished his mission to solve Middle Eastern peace that apparently was happening a couple years ago? I mean, how does he find the time? How does he find the time?
And I'll never forget during that whole solving peace in the Middle East is when his Twitter was talking something about terrorism and, you know, counteracting it. And they put up a photo and it looks like pretty much, it just looks like a village and Black people are walking around. And it was exposed that literally was just like a random village and people walking around going about their business.
Oh no, he did the Google thing.
Yeah, they did that one. They did that one.
Also, you want to see terrorism?
Awesome.
Let's talk about domestic white terrorism that we don't like to talk about.
Sorry, random white people. By the way, I'm just saying, like, you could have just got a shot.
This could have gone a lot of different ways. It's like if you search angry people and you see a lot of Black people come back in your Google search and not white people.
I was like, great.
Well, anyway, I guess we'll see what William's next. He's honestly like the Ken doll. It's like, I'm sport. I'm astronaut. You know what I mean? I'm like, these are not tangible goals. This is wild.
Except he would be the annoying Ken that wants to be it all. So all the other Kens wouldn't like him because he'd constantly be trying to like take their mojo. He's like, I'm beach. I'm surfer though.
This is my Mojo Dojo house. All right. That was absolutely wonderful. Now on to our interview with Christine Wells.
We are very excited to have the next guest on our show. Christine Wells writes historical fiction featuring strong, fascinating women. Her latest novel, The Royal Windsor Secret, is coming out on September 12th. It follows a young woman seeking to discover the truth about her mysterious past. Could she be the secret daughter of the Prince of Wales? We don't know. We will find out.
Well, we're not going to give it away, but welcome, Christine, to Lady Audacity.
Thanks so much for having me. It's really great to be here.
Thank you.
We are thrilled. We are thrilled. Books are our love language. Alex and I, the number of times we were texting back and forth about your book, it shows, I mean, we read it for the podcast, but we would have read it just for fun. It is.
We read it really
It was so good. I finished it in like 2 days because I had to know what happened.
Meredith finished it before me, which I got to try to like get some secrets out from her because I'm just saying, you know how to write a slow burn first and foremost, because I know a lot of ladies out there, men, theys, and thems are going to be asking, what's the rom-com like? Angsty. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you. I'm so pleased to hear
you like the angst, I can tell, because Brody and Cleo just okay. I was like, Meredith, let me know, please. I can't take this anymore. But and also a part of how amazing they were. One of the things that just I loved and I'm so enamored by was how well you were able to weave in the facts with the fictional characters and stories. Like, I feel like Lady and Lord Grayson, which are both fictional characters, I love how I feel like you use them as tools to almost see how those set of like aristocrats responded to so many things going on around them. And one of them, of course, is Wallis Simpson. Like, I know these are fictional characters, but the feelings they express about her and like that nickname of that woman very much reflects what we know how Wallis's peers felt about her. And then you get more into it. And there's specific characterization for this plot near the end is when Cleo once again sees them. And it's during like the height of World War II. And obviously I don't want to give too much away.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just stopping there. I know. I can sometimes spill spoilers, but I promise I will not. But what I found very interesting about the characterization, because just to put it frank, they're giving spoiled brat like throughout it. I have like the Khloe Kardashian voice in my head, like people are dying. Wallace and Edward. Okay, people are dying. So I was really wondering, like, was that kind of like your own, artistic embellishment, or did you get that characterization from things that you were reading about them?
There's an anecdote that I have told before, but I'll tell it again, and it's true. Wallis Simpson, the war had started, the Nazis were occupying Paris, where both Wallis and he was the Duke of Windsor by then, in World War II. So they fled to the south. They had a chateau that they rented in the south of France. And then they decided, okay, no, we have to get out of Europe. So they traveled to Spain, which was supposed to be neutral, but obviously was hand in glove with the Nazis after the Nazis had helped them out in the Spanish Civil War.
Yeah.
And then they arrived in Portugal. And the first thing Wallace worries about is her O'Donnell swimsuit that she absolutely loves. And somebody must go back into occupied France. Well, the South wasn't occupied, but, Vichy France.
It's hard to find a good swimsuit, though, I will say. I'm just kidding.
Well, it matched her eyes.
Meredith's giving tip right now.
Those famous blue eyes. And so they decided that the Americans would have to send it over in a diplomatic bag. And these were their concerns when everything, Poland was being razed to the ground and Britain was preparing to fight a battle that, they were pretty much alone in. So, it was a very skewed sense of values.
Yes.
Can I ask you, Christine, with writing this book, was there something you read or a nugget of a character or something that started this whole book? Like, where was that starting point for you?
Well, I actually really wanted to write about Shepherd's Hotel in Cairo. I'd read these Amelia Peabody mysteries, for years and years, and they were so fabulous. And it was about an archaeologist in Egypt, and they always stayed at Shepherd's Hotel. And I looked into it, and all of these famous people would stay there, Mark Twain and Winston Churchill and Rita Hayworth and the Aga Khan. It was just it was one of the first luxury hotels in the world. And Egypt was a real holiday resort for people from colder climates in Europe and even America. They would come and spend the winter in Egypt, and they would stay at Shepherd's Hotel.
Yeah. And
so then it just sort of grew from there. I knew about the Windsors, and then this connection with the Windsor mistress who had been in Egypt and stayed at Shepherd's Hotel. And then it all started, it just sort of drew from all of these things that I already knew about, but managed to put it into a story together.
I love that entry point. Yes. I love that. I love hearing that.
Because, that's like a character in itself, the hotel, and, Egypt. And one of the other things I have down on here is how you were able to talk about colonialism in the book. And mind you, it's not like a plot line, not to give too much away. There's no big speech about it or something. But you show it so well how it's always this kind of background character, though, and how these, white people from different economic backgrounds, and of course, some of these people are aristos and stuff, how they think about colonialism in the 30s and what is their relationship with it. And I wanted to read one of this line because it cracked me up. And I feel like it's just a really great example of how you talk about it. It's this conversation happening with Lady Grayson. So he says, Cleo, this is Brody talking. Cleo's one with the ear for languages, said Brody. She even speaks a little Arabic. Does she? Lady G seemed unimpressed. In that case, you will endear yourselves to our host. There's nothing more ignorant than going to a foreign country and expecting the inhabitants to speak English. Brody regarded Lady G for a long moment, then returned his gaze to the scenery. Very true. I just have to say, am I right when I'm saying Brody was being shady?
Yeah. Because Brody's Scottish, so he knows all about British colonialism.
Okay.
So what he is saying is, you come to Egypt all the time and you don't know any Arabic.
Exactly.
And yet when we go to France, it's polite to speak French.
Right. Everybody said, he's like, Cleo, you're staring like, what do you say, a colonial. It's cracking up.
I liked how you wove that through.
It was just so well done. Again, making sure you're taking these very real situations and stuff like that and putting it into this world. It was just so well done. And obviously we have to talk about a big component here, the jewels. The jewelry, you guys.
Oh my gosh. The descriptions are like candy in this book.
I was constantly Googling, looking for these photos and everything, and just like, oh, wow. But also what sticks out to me was just the money. Okay. Do you think Edward really had all that money? I mean, I know he's a duke and a future king, but I'm just he loved jewelry, and obviously he loved giving Wallace jewelry, but I'm is there really that much money in the world? I know I'm poor to these people, but geez.
Yeah, it does boggle the mind. And I think it was a combination of getting loans from people and not actually paying for the things because, it was such a privilege to serve the royals that, what you mean you want us to pay?
Yeah, I wasn't saying, how do you ask the royals? King, I need you to pay my loan or pay the loan. How does that happen?
Yes. And there was actually a bit of a shady Frenchman who was hand in glove with the Nazis who
do you mean
hosted...
Charles Bordeaux or something?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And so he even hosted their wedding and would lend them money because, I guess there was a bit of political maneuvering in there because Hitler actually liked the British. He thought that their values were aligned with his, and I think he really loved the royal family too, the idea of this. So what he wanted was to set up Edward VIII as his puppet king and Wallis as queen. And because Edward VIII was so in love with Wallis, I think the idea of her being queen was so, attractive to him. And he really wanted to be involved in a political way, which the royal family is not supposed to be. They're supposed to be completely neutral, not make any political statements whatsoever, because that's not, they were removed from that role by Magna Carta. So they're actually not supposed to dabble in politics, but he wanted to do that. He didn't want to cut ribbons and things like that. He wanted to get in and express opinions.
So the other interesting thing about you, Christine, is that you're a lawyer. I mean, what can't you do? What can't you do?
I tell you what, I can't do law anymore. That was 20 years ago. I've forgotten everything I knew. No, I'm really interested in the law, and a lot of those aspects inform the books. I mean, there's a court case in this book and so forth. But yeah, no, I'm not doing that anymore.
I was wondering how being a lawyer really helped inform and write the book. I mean, I guess from just a research, standpoint, that probably, those skills probably helped, I'm assuming. But I'm also just wondering more about where does the history stop and the fiction begin in historical fiction?
It's always a question for the author, really, I think, because some authors, like Bridgerton is just so... It's a fantasy as well as, I mean, the books that Julia Quinn wrote were based on history, but they were also completely a lovely fantasy to step into. And then there are obviously people who take the history and twist it, or then further along is somebody like me who takes real people and might fictionalize a little bit to fit with the story, but nothing... I never do anything major that really... I'll never change the timing of a big world event or anything like that to suit my story. I try to fit it around. And, there are some people who just say, oh, I want to write about Wallis Simpson, and so they just write what they imagine it would have been like without much regard for the actual historical events that happened. So there's a real spectrum, and I think it really depends on what you want and what you're prepared to... historical accuracy is subjective anyway. So yeah, it's all up to the author, I think, and what the readers enjoy.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like they would really enjoy this because I know for me, I was so excited to see what was, facts and what was fictional. Like when you're giving the description of Wallis Simpson's engagement ring, we're just getting into her for our Patreon we're going to be doing later. So I've kind of stayed a little ignorant until doing more and more research. So I'm seeing this description. I'm like, wait, this again, I'm like, this can't be real. Like, this is just too much. And looking it up and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this all actually happened. And there are really, really good moments like that. But even more of what I really like, Chloe, obviously she's a fictional character in some of her story and stuff, but I wanted to shake her sometimes, but most of the time I wanted to cry with her. And I don't know, I just love to know more about like your feelings towards Chloe and your inspiration behind her. Cause she's one of the main characters, and really she's great because she's not perfect, but gosh, you love her. I just want to snuggle her.
Yes. Well, I had this vision of her being quite young at the start, and she really grows throughout the novel.
Yes.
So I had to think about, what does a 16-year-old do in this situation? And maybe she can be a little bit bullitigate and doesn't think too much before she acts at the start of the novel. And I hope very much that when you want to shake her, you do love her as well, because she really is the heart of the book, I think. And obviously the courtesan, which we'll probably get into later, is a much harder character because she's had to live through such hard times. So very big contrast between the two. And I was very conscious of that with Cleo, we're just really following her story and her quest to find out who her real father is. And hopefully we love and cry and laugh with her along the way.
Yeah, I would love to get into the courtesan, and I guess that's where, I mean, we know historically Edward got around the whole world. He just spun that globe. And it is, presumably he would have, discreetly found, women who you could pay for this to, for sex, to engage in it in that manner. And so I found it so interesting the way we brought in the courtesan, and then also all the way the jewels are another character in the book. And I'd love to hear you talk more about that.
Well, the jewels were such a serendipitous connection because I'd been reading about Cartier. That's yet another of my obsessions. So Cartier is one of
same girl.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd read all about their history, and then the jewelry kept popping up. It really was the case that Marguerite, the courtesan in this book, built her wealth by accepting jewelry from gentlemen, because there was this sort of unspoken thing that you, as a really high class courtesan, I mean, she was consorting with princes and industrialists from all over the world. You did not get paid in cash because that was, tawdry and vulgar. You got paid in jewels because that was a gift. But of course, that was how she built her wealth. And from the opening scene, she is obsessed with building her wealth through jewels. And that is her identity. And then, of course, Cleo wants to make jewels, become a designer of jewels. And so that carries through. And then, of course, Wallace is obsessed with jewels and has this very deep connection with Cartier, because Cartier designed so many of the love tokens between Wallace and Edward VIII. Wallace had a bracelet of crucifixes that was a present for the wedding. She gave Edward VIII the cigarette case that had plotted on it in jewels all of the destinations they'd travelled to together. So it was gold, and it was, etched with the map, and then it had a little ruby for, wherever they'd been. So all of this when you're writing, it's just so magical when that all comes together, and you never planned it, but it just becomes this motif that just keeps repeating. So I really brought that out in the book.
I love that. And just quickly speaking about where this, did you know from the beginning where everyone was going, to the end, or do things change as they go around, or did you just have the beginning and then you kind of saw through the characters where things were leading? Because there is a delicious twist that we are not going to give away here, but y'all need to read the book. You need to read the book to hear it.
The text after that one.
I'm going to try. I'm really bad with spoilers, so I'm going to try not to give a spoiler. The way I write historical fiction tends to be plotted according to the historical events. So I knew a certain thing had to happen at the end, and I knew various plot points along the way because I knew Edward VIII only did one debutante presentation.
Yes.
So he was only king for less than a year, and that was the presentation Cleo had to be presented at, which then dictated how old she was, and when I could start the book, and her birth had to fit in with the affair that Edward VIII had during World War One with Marguerite the courtesan. So I have all these fence posts, but I'm not always sure how I'll get there, and I'm not always sure who did what, or so yes, I know some things that are set in stone because of the history, but the rest I make up as I go along.
Yeah, and again, I know I keep going back to the jewels, but again, they're so important and they're so beautiful and glittery. And I don't know if you mentioned this, but what I found myself too by the end of the book, especially is thinking about, Margaret and like Wallace and stuff, and just how these women obviously come from very different, demographics and so on, and they're treated very differently by this world. Margaret is a sex worker, and Wallace is this beautiful heiress that men would marry, not just have as a mistress, even though she has 2 divorces. But all of it, like the center of this, though, is all of them seem to need men, because they need to live. These jewels are their money. It's how they have a home. It's how they eat. It's how they have help. And I don't know, did you kind of mean to kind of show those rope? There's yes, one is a sex worker and one is a heiress. But at the end of the day, some of these women during this time had to rely on men, and let's be real, how they could attract men to live.
Yeah, that is very true. And I think Wallace's appearance is quite deceptive because she was married to Mr. Simpson, of course, and they weren't doing too well when she came to meet Edward VIII. So she thought she was hitching her wagon to a star, and then he turned out to be, and I guess the theme of the book, if there is one, is that you've got the independent women who choose that they're going to rely on themselves.
Yes.
And you've got these other 2 who are always looking for the next man to provide for them, when in today's world they would be very capable of having their own careers. But at the time, and of course Marguerite, pregnant at 15, kicked out without a reference, in those days, she had very little choice about what she would do. And she, by grit and by determination, she climbed that ladder. She started out on the streets.
Unfortunately, we had some audio export issues during this episode, but thankfully you got to hear the entire interview with Christine Wells. She was a delight. She even did the little pinkies up with us at the end. So remember, The Royal Windsor Secret by Christine Wells drops September 12th, 2023. You can also find Christine on social media. She is on Facebook as Christine Wells Author. You can find her on Instagram at Christine Wells _. And you can also find her over at Twitter or Meta or whatever they're calling themselves today, Christine Wells 0. You can, of course, find Lady Audaci-TEA on Instagram and TikTok at Lady Audaci-TEA. If you have questions, comments, concerns, you can reach out to us at LadyAudaci-TEA@gmail.com. Until next time, pinkies up.